In the latest of a series of articles in the New York Times, a much acclaimed and 2 times Pulitzer Prize winner journalist doesn't pull his punches when writing about Team China. And he's been at it since at least last April. This investigative journalist extraordinary by the name of Michael Schmidt is upping the ante in his efforts to defame Chinese swimmers. We all know by now how much of a sore loser some have been, as China ended the American run of dominance in the 4x100 medley relay that stretched back to the introduction of the event at the 1960 Rome Games. And it was days after Chinese Pan Zhanle won gold in men's 100-meter freestyle, breaking the world record and finishing over a second ahead of the second place. Wow, well, is me. The international mainstream media smelled a rat, especially US media and politicians, but hear me out. Pan's feet 100% legit, and Team China has been the most tested before and during the Paris Games. Yet their victory has been overshadowed by a dark cloud of scandal. The storm has been brewing for months, and Michael Schmidt has been the most virulent. On April the 20th, he co-authored an article which supposedly broke the story about 23 Chinese swimmers testing positive before the Tokyo Games, but were allowed to compete and ultimately won medals. Since then, he has authored 15 articles focusing on Chinese swimmers. Dedication or obsession? His main point is more like a conspiracy theory. Chinese swimmers take performance-enhancing drugs or PEDs, while WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and World Aquatics, formerly FINA, are in cahoots to hush it up. What exactly is the story? In his latest article, Schmidt continues to mislead the reader about food contamination. Thing is, some countries use growth promoters to feed beef cattle. It is pervasive, using WADA's words, for athletes to unknowingly ingest certain banned substances. And these substances have been identified in trace amount, resulting in Chinese swimmers testing positive. After rigorous investigation and independent review, WADA accepted the conclusion that these were food contamination cases which did not warrant any penalty unless new evidence emerges. The matter has been discussed openly and repeatedly among the anti-doping communities, and thousands of food contamination cases have been confirmed across the world over the years. It's not black and white, as Schmidt suggests. Schmidt threw the proverbial stone in a glass house because food contamination can happen to everyone. WADA points out, and I quote, "Apart from China in particular, there have been several of these cases in the United States in the past few months alone where highly intricate contamination scenarios were accepted." Mind the words, highly intricate. That's our tumbleweed moment here. Looks like people are not totally convinced. In fact, the most recent known US case involves track and field athlete Ariel Knighton. He tested positive in March for trenbolone, a PED, but US anti-doping agency WASADA said it was food contamination. Knighton qualified at the Paris Games before the decision was reviewed by WADA. If Schmidt is right, shouldn't Knighton be suspended before his name is cleared? And if WADA is not to be trusted, who holds USADA accountable? Righteous Schmidt should get on his high horse and demand that WADA steps in here as well. Schmidt and his co-author also rant about transparency. They argue that China has not disclosed that the Chinese swimmers were tested positive. He and other doubters criticize China for not publicizing the positive results as quote-unquote rules require. But neither WADA nor World Aquatics have any issue with China's conduct on this case. There are specific rules about information sharing and disclosure in WADA's anti-doping code, and obviously WADA is the most authoritative agency in the interpretation of these rules. So when talking about rules, whose rules is Schmidt referring to? His own? The legacy media is just part of the crumbling empire that's clutching at straws to survive. As we speak, the US Justice Department and the FBI have opened a criminal investigation involving the Chinese case based on a domestic anti-doping law, another blatant example of long-arm jurisdiction. And a bipartisan group of US lawmakers has threatened to cut US funding for WADA. Are we not seeing the classic pattern of foul play made in USA? Whoever doesn't agree with it is partial at best, corrupt at worst. The World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the UNESCO, the International Court of Justice, and the list goes on. Nobody complained about WADA when Chinese or Russian players were punished. Face it, Michael Schmidt, you cry foul, but you are making a fool of yourself. You can write as much tosh as you want about China and WADA. Chinese athletes will forge ahead. What doesn't break us makes us stronger.